Good afternoon, everyone. I've known today's guest. We were just talking about this backstage in the green room. I've known today's guest, Cisco's president and chief product officer, Jeetu Patel, for at least 15 years now. When we first met, I was running the Fierce Content Management newsletter, and Jeetu was involved in EMC documentum marketing. I've watched his meteoric rise with some awe, mind you, first to chief product officer and chief strategy officer at Box. And then in 2020, he moved to Cisco, where he earned the trust of CEO Jack Robbins and catapulted into his current role overseeing product across Cisco. And that's pretty broad. This is from a guy who immigrated from Mumbai in 1991 with, by his own account, very little means. His immigrant success story is a sharp contrast to the current narrative. Today, we're going to talk about his career, AI, Cisco, and much more. I'm Ron Miller, and this is Fast Forward on PPN. All right, welcome, Jeetu.
Ron Miller, so good to see you, my friend.
So good to have you on the show. When we first met, as I mentioned in the intro, you were at Documentum, a classic on-prem enterprise software company. Then you went to Box, which was trying to disrupt everybody with SaaS, which was new in those days. And now you're running product at Cisco, which spans hardware, software, networking, and security, among other things.
And silicon.
Yes. And that means you've had a front row seat to several generations of enterprise technology. How does this shift to AI compare to the shift from on-prem to SaaS and cloud, both from your own personal perspective and from that of a networking company like Cisco?
Ron, the thing that I've always found is, and we saw this at Box, we saw this at EMC, you never fight a megatrend. You always use it as a tailwind. And so, and the nuance is you have to know the difference between a megatrend and a hype cycle. And so,
not always easy to do, right?
It's not always easy to do. But I think at least in the way that I try to reduce it down is it's quite instinctive when it becomes when the use cases that you can do with a new technology start getting ideated in the community rather than the creator of the technology that's thinking about every single use case. You know that there's a movement that's starting to happen. And with AI, I don't know if you remember this, but specifically, I mean, AI has been around for a while, but when the transformer movement happened and the chat GPT consumerized it, people started using it and they started extrapolating on all the different things that could happen, right? To say they started using it. And you knew that there was a movement in the making at that point. And so when that happens, you have to just make sure that you go all in. And, large companies, what they do well is every large company has a bunch of experiments running. They do fine with that. What they're not good at is when something's going really well, they don't go all in. And if you tend to go all in at that point in time, everything changes because now your scale becomes a tremendous advantage and you can actually steer the ship in a way where the puck is going to be going rather than where the puck has been. And so I do feel like, having said that, though, I think it's important to keep in mind that with AI, I genuinely feel like there are no priors because the scale proportion that we're talking about of the change is not something that we have fully kind of even grokked right now. And I think it does it a disservice when we compare it to like, okay, what happened during the .com move or what happened during cloud or what happened during the PC revolution, because I feel like those were all great in their own accord, but it's very different from what's happening over here right now. And so exciting times, also times where we should not have rose-colored glasses on because there's a lot of risks to humanity. and we should be thinking about that as well. And this is the first time where I feel like the importance of the tech community to keep in mind, not just the upside of AI, but also what the downside could be, and mitigating the downside at runtime is super important. Like, you can't just say we'll figure it out once it actually has its downside effects, because sometimes it might be too late and you might not be able to reverse it.
So, talking about the risk to humanity, there's some, including me, who say that, the AI lab leaders in particular are, overstating the power of AI and kind of at the cost of what AI can actually do right now. And they're losing the room. And I'll give you an example. Pew Research came out with some research just this week that said young people, particularly between 18 and 34, the trend line of trusting AI is going way down. And I feel like if you lose the young people, you're kind of losing the battle. And I framed it on LinkedIn as being like a PR battle. And I think that might not be the best way to talk about it. But when you make this assertion that it's going to destroy humanity, or it's going to like be unleashed, as opposed to like this is going to help you do your job better. I mean, the messaging is bad, and I'm wondering how you respond to that.
No, I actually agree that this the and I've always believed this. I've found that this kind of narrative that AI will remove all value that humans can add to society, and all we will be doing is staring at the beach, not having anything to do, I think is just bonkers to me. Like, it doesn't make sense. The reason it doesn't make sense is because with every step function improvement that I've seen in AI, a human bottleneck has emerged. And the last mile is generally pretty hard with AI, right? And so, in order to get something to a state where we would feel really good about the outcome, I think it's great to have AI and it's great to have humans. And the absence of humans in a completely machine oriented world, I don't think actually gets you what you're looking for. Because at some point in time, like people are like, oh, wow, these agents can do everything, so I don't need to do anything. No, you still have to consume and internalize and form judgment and create a level of taste and have instinct and make sure that you've got some kind of texture of the fabric that's going to ensue in the future. And those things are not something that just happens without humans. Like, humans have to be deeply engaged. And so the most successful humans right now are the ones that are deeply engaged, not the ones that are, saying I'm not going to do anything with it. So I do feel like that narrative has been not the most productive narrative in my mind. Like, I feel like we should have a narrative that we talk in a balanced way about what the upside is, what the downside is, mitigate the risks on the downside, and optimize for the upside. But this kind of extreme levels of
Doom speak, right?
I don't think it really helps. Now, on the other hand, what I do feel is it'll move faster than we think. And so, being in the state where you just kind of are a distant observer saying, I'm just going to wait for it to get better before I do anything with it, I think would be bad, and it would cause suffering. Because what will happen is the delta between someone that is dexterous with AI and someone who is not a 10% differential in productivity. It is like a 50x differential. And so, at some point in time, if you don't use AI, it gets very hard to justify how you might be able to contribute. But that doesn't mean that AI is going to make you irrelevant. It just means that the absence of use of AI will make you struggle for relevance.
No, I agree completely. You mentioned bottlenecks, and you're right. And you're a networking company. You know about bottlenecks. That's what you're constantly battling, right? They're constantly moving, and you're constantly plugging them. Where are the bottlenecks now in AI? You think where's the biggest bottlenecks?
I think the first one is a macro across all industries is last mile. I think the last mile is not completely like. If you ask AI to do something for you, the beauty about AI is you never have to start with a blank sheet of paper. you always have a companion. You always have someone that can ideate with you and do things that you would have not been able to do otherwise. The downside is if you just leave it completely to AI and don't put your touch to it, um, the absence of the last mile is noticeable. Now, will that eventually get solved? Maybe, but it's actually kind of fun to be participating in the last mile. It's
Yeah.
fun to go out and make sure that you make it your own and not just be completely disengaged from it. And that's where we can add value because we have a very different kind of perspective than a machine does, and bringing that to life, in fact, is a good thing. So first one is last mile. The second one is if I go tactical. Let's take coding as an example, which is one of the most successful use cases.
Sure.
As you automate coding, code review becomes a bottleneck. As you automate code review, judgment on what to build and what not to build becomes a bottleneck. So like there's always going to be a new bottleneck for humans that emerges. So every time there's a step function improvement in AI, there's a human bottleneck that emerges simultaneously. And that, in my mind, is a state of perpetuity. I think you will always have new human bottlenecks that emerge as a result of it. I'll give you an example. My 15-year-old daughter, who is not a super tech obsessed person, like she's like, yeah, I decided, Dad, I'm gonna build a store, an e-commerce store. And so she just went on Lovable, used my credit card, got an account, built a website. That website is better than anything I've seen most people who've
Right.
actually been doing that build. She wanted to start, she loves hoodies and streetwear and all of that. So she started creating and designing her own hoodies and streetwear. And then she put it up there. And I got on that site and I'm like, honey, like I want to buy one of these. Like, where? And I'm like, what are you going to price it at? And she's like, I don't know. I think I'm going to price it at $350 a piece. I'm like, that's
Oh,
expensive for a hoodie. Like, who's going to pay for that? She's like, Dad, you have to build the story and then people will come to it and they will pay money for it, And I'm like, all right, like, more power to you. And she's doing this with her boyfriend and they're just going at it. And so I feel like this would have been something that she would have never had the opportunity to do because she's not like programmer geek. She's not great at math, but she loves doing this. And it's a creative side of her. And so the creative person was able to go out and take control of, in their own hands and say, I'm going to go out and do something that I could have not done before. And we should look at that and celebrate it. Going, that's what AI is able to do, is it's able to unlock more human potential rather than less.
That's a great story. I love that story, and I think that you're right. It does put this capability into people's hands. One thing that I've been thinking about,
By the way, she is not pricing for volume; she's pricing for margin.
Well, yeah,
something that I'm like,
she's definitely got a marketer's mindset. I'll tell you that.
Really?
Tell the right story, and you can charge anything. um, you know, you just switching gears a little bit here. Cisco, and I wrote a story about Cisco. I think you had just joined the company when I wrote the story when I was at TechCrunch, and it was kind of about Cisco's acquisition strategy, and it was a really great story to write. And I talked to a bunch of people. Yeah, I'm sure I talked to you too about that. I think you were running security at that point, and you had bought a bunch of security startups. But Cisco, going back to the 90s, has always been extremely acquisitive. And it's just an interesting strategy that Cisco has used to build the company. Of course, the biggest bet was the $28 billion purchase of Splunk a couple of years ago. And as it turned out, I think it was a brilliant idea because you guys, what do you need? You need data. What does Splunk have? It has all the data. But right. How do acquisitions fit into your product strategy? Because you're the product guy today. And how do you decide what you should buy versus what you should build?
It's a really good question. And one of the things that tends to happen with these things is, 6 years ago when I joined, when people would come to me, they would say, Jeetu, this is a really important area in the business. What are we going to buy? And what I realized at the time is Cisco was operating much more like a holding company because we had made like 250 acquisitions or so. And we would just miss market transitions and we would then pay the premium and buy stuff. And that never sat well with me, because I'm deep down in my heart, I'm a product guy, and I want to build great products that people love, that they can talk to their friends and family about. And so one of the things that we decided to do very early on when I came is, I'm like, look, our strategy is not going to be about acquisitions. Our strategy is about making sure that we define a true north that we want to get to for our customers. And we're going to build great products that people love, that they can talk to their friends and family about, number one. Principle number two is, we're going to make sure that we really focus on adoption, which is the closest proxy to value. It's not a guarantor of value, but if you don't have adoption, you don't have value. So build products that people love, that they keep coming back to and adopting. And number three, have an open ecosystem so you can integrate with everyone else in the world. Don't be arrogant about thinking it's a closed ecosystem is going to work. Now, once you've defined this, if you find a company that can accelerate your vision, we won't be shy to deploy our balance sheet. But the strategy in and of itself should not be an acquisition strategy. The strategy should be, what is your product strategy? And an acquisition can and cannot, may or may not fit in. But the reason I don't like having a strategy which says, what is your acquisition strategy? I don't have an acquisition strategy. I have a product strategy. And the reason I don't have an acquisition strategy is, it is a very risky thing to do, to go out. There's so many uncontrollables in an acquisition that have to work out for an acquisition to land, that I don't feel like that is a way that you can create a definitive path. And so the definitive path you have to create is saying, I'm going to take control of my destiny and build the things I want to build. And if I need expertise from another company that comes along, we'll do it. So I've made about 28 acquisitions in my time here.
That's a fair number.
That's a fair number, right? One big one, which is Splunk. Everything else tends to be pretty small. And the reason for that is, I feel like large companies are hard to integrate. So you have to have the cultural match. You have to have the product not being superbly overlapping, because then you have to kill one product to go out for favor of the other. And that gets to be very hard to do. And there's internal politics that starts to ensue, which you don't want to do and spend your cycles doing. And then the third thing is, you want to make sure that it's very complementary and can actually take advantage of the scale that you have when you're bringing it in. In Splunk's case, it was all of those, and it was at a reasonable price. If we didn't have that, then we would have not made the acquisition. And so what I think about is, the large companies I tend to be very wary of, and I'm much more skeptical of going out and making a large acquisition. I am very pro making a small acquisition, or a bunch of small acquisitions. And the reason for that is, we've changed our staffing mix in a very different way. The way we think about this is, it's a rule of thirds. A third of the company and a third of my team are people who know how to navigate Cisco, and are operators that have been that know how to kind of get work done within Cisco. That's 1/3 of the leaders that I hire. The second third of the leaders are people that are operators that come from our competitors on the outside. They're scaled operators that come from competitors on the outside. And then the third is CEOs and co-founders of companies that we've acquired, that really are keen on doing something entrepreneurial and are completely comfortable breaking glass. And then you pair them up with the people that are scaled operators and the people that actually know how to navigate Cisco. And before you know it, magic starts to happen. But that requires that I'm going to make a few acquisitions. There's a flow of talent coming from the outside, so you don't get too insular. Right. But it also is important that you don't just make, if you just had 100% of my team that was CEOs that were startup people, it would be chaos. If you had 100% of the people that were people that knew how to go out and navigate Cisco, we would not have enough innovation, because they haven't gotten enough outside in to enrich their thinking. If it's 100% of the people that are folks that came from the scaled operators from the outside, you would miss this creative spark that happens with people that are entrepreneurial in nature. But the combination of those three enrich the experience for all three. And that requires acquisitions, but it does not require acquisitions to be a central part of the strategy. It requires a product strategy to be in existence and an acquisition to be an accelerant to the strategy.
So when you're buying those companies and you're incorporating them in, I love that system that you have, because it's a mix of different types of people who bring different sets of skills and mindsets to the table, and
That's right.
hopefully when they all get together, some magic happens, and they make everybody kind of mix nicely together, and instead of like having a cooey mess. Um,
And you also get
okay.
conflict gets accepted as a necessary condition of business. So there's you have to have intellectual debates, and you cannot shy away from those. So when people try to have fake kindness, which is I'm going to be nice on your face, but then go say something behind your back that's going to be like, vetoing the whole thing, but you're doing a pocket veto. I don't put up for that. Right. And so what you want to have is I'd rather you actually have the conflict at the table with everyone, have the debate, figure it out, go back at each other, regardless of title. And once you decide which way to go, then lock and load, and then everyone forgets whose idea it was, and then just make sure that we go execute. And that, I think, is an important dimension to keep in mind.
And how do you avoid, kind of quashing the innovation that those companies bring to you by kind of, bringing them into the mix? That in itself changes them, right? It changes. I mean, some people will say, and I mean, I don't know that I completely agree with this, but some people will say the second a big company like Cisco buys you, innovation dies, right? So, because the big company by its nature is, kind of sucks it into the big machine, and you lose all that goodness that it was generating by being a solo company. So how do you kind of avoid that dynamic, knowing that going in when you buy it, it's going to change the company that you're buying?
Yeah, there's a few things. One is this notion of cultural fit. And then the second one is let me start with the cultural fit first, which is I don't look for cultural fit. I look for cultural expansion. So if someone says, you have to come in and fit into our culture, Steve Jobs had very famously said one time, like, I'm not hiring you so I can tell you what to do. I'm hiring you so you can tell me what to do, because you're thinking about the problem way deeper than I am. So, I feel like that's a pretty important dynamic, is you have to culturally shift people into, one, being comfortable with debate, two, speaking their mind, and three, not being kind of cynical about things, but making sure that they're comfortable with making sure that the intellectual debate goes back and forth during the time when debate is warranted. Once a decision is made, you can't keep having debates unendingly, because that's what turns into analysis paralysis. So that's that's an important thing to keep in mind. So the first thing that we do is, for innovation not to die out, you have to make sure that you get the founding team that you're acquiring the agency, so that they know that they don't have to fit in. They have to make sure that they teach us something, and they also have to make sure that they learn something from the engine. Look, if there are founders that come in sometimes thinking everything Cisco does is stupid, that can't be the case. We're generating $63 billion in revenue, right?
Doing something right.
We're doing something right. On the other hand, if we had figured everything out, then we wouldn't be buying you. And so the internal people have to know that you have to make sure that you're making an acquisition so that you can give those people agency, so that they can expand and stretch our thinking. And in the absence of that, we will actually stagnate. And what you can't do is let the process bureaucracy that every company has supersede the creative spirit. That cannot happen, right? Like, you have to make sure that that's actually allowed to nurture. So that's number one, is you have to make sure that you do the cultural piece. The second thing that we have to do from an innovation standpoint is we are maniacally obsessed about this notion of being the world's largest startup, operating at speed, but with scale, right? And that means, like, startups only operate with speed. Large companies that tend to be legacy companies only operate at scale. We want to make sure that we operate at speed with scale. And the yardstick that I always have is, a new company coming in should actually do their life's best work and innovate at the fastest velocity possible, but also operate at scale at Cisco compared to what they were doing as a startup. And I will tell you this, like, time and time over again, the people that are running startups, by the way, most of the large programs that I'm running within my organization, a lot of them are run by the CEOs, and they have actually taken on a much larger mission than their core product, the core company they sold me. So, for example, there's a guy, DJ, on our team. He built our entire platform and runs our AI program. We bought a small email management company from him. We didn't even care about the email management company. I just wanted him. And then immediately as he came in, the first question that these founders will ask sometimes is, okay, I sold you a company. How do I make it $100 million business? I'm like, I don't care to make it $100 million business, because when the denominator is 63 billion, going next year to 72 billion, you don't need to make $100 million business. You need to make sure that you think about making Cisco $1 trillion company. And so what are you going to do to go out and fundamentally change your mental framing so you are thinking in a much broader aperture than what you've thought about before? And if you're interested in building $1 trillion company, then I can give you a lot of tools and the platform to learn not just the speed dimension, which you know pretty well, but also the scale dimension. And if you merge those two together, you will be a better operator for your next startup than you've ever been.
So we only have a few minutes left here, and I can't believe how fast this has gone by. But
So
for
I was
years,
shorter on my answers.
it's all right. It's all right. These have been great answers. It's been a fantastic interview. For years, Cisco has been trying to evolve, to be more than a networking company, to be more than a hardware company, to have this recurring revenue that will kind of feed into the business, because for a time the networking business was shrinking, and the company was looking for ways to enhance that, and it was a perfectly reasonable strategy in like the 2010s. But now AI seems to have turbocharged everybody, including your business, because everybody's got to update their data centers, and people are building data centers at this tremendous rate, which means you're probably selling a lot of hardware. How does AI change what Cisco ultimately focuses on as a company?
Yeah, people always ask me this question: are you a hardware company, and is it hard to be a software company and a hardware company? Are you a subscription company, or are you a perpetual company? I actually don't like those demarcations. The way I think about it is we are a critical infrastructure company for the AI era. And what that means is we have to deliver a vertically integrated platform that is a co-designed full stack. And what does that mean? That means that we have a unique advantage that no one else in the world has. We build our own silicon for networking. We build our own photonics. We have our own systems hardware. We have our own system software and operating system. We have our own platform for data, platform for security, platform for observability. We build our own models. We have our own applications, and we build our own agents. And all of these are vertically designed full stack. And so the way that I tell people you should think about us is, just like Apple is a fully integrated vertical platform, just like Tesla is a fully integrated vertical platform, we are a fully integrated vertical platform for critical infrastructure for AI. And so we are critical infrastructure that powers critical infrastructure. And when you start thinking of it that way, it's a very different kind of mental model. And are you a hardware company? Yes. Are you a software company? Yes. Are you a platform company? Yes. Most importantly, though, we're a vertically integrated platform that's co-designed, so that the software that we build is also optimized in the silicon, and the silicon we build is optimized for every layer above it. And the photonics that we build ties it all together. And we do it for data centers, and we do it for hyperscalers and neoclouds and sovereign clouds and service providers. And then we also take all of that learning that we get from all of those and make it available to the enterprise. So it's a very different way to think about the business, where you're solving problems, and it's a problem orientation rather than what widget am I trying to solve people for. And so, for example, the priority for what does this translate to culturally? The priority to enhance the platform is more important than the priority to enhance an individual product. And you have to make sure that we enhance the platform when there's a trade-off decision that needs to be made 9 out of 10 times. And if you can do that right, then magic starts to happen. And I think the past 2 years, we have more than doubled our stock price. And so people get excited about that. But I'm like, you should not focus on that. What you should focus on instead is, what have we done to go out and add more value? We literally grew bookings last quarter by 35%. We grew revenues by 18%. And we grew our margins at the operating level from 34.3 to 35.9%. And our OPEX only grew 5%. And so what you were able to do is actually make this engine come to full harmony across the entirety of the stack, because you're just seeing the snowball effect of that.
Well, Jeetu, I wish we had another half hour. Maybe you can come back and we can continue the conversation, because this has been just such a great conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you for coming by, and thank you all for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the Fast Forward newsletter. You'll see the QR code in the outro. Please join us next Thursday, August 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for PPN Presents Last Call, where you see the slide up now, where we're going to gather a bunch of PPN hosts together and talk about the news of the day. And that should be a really fun time. And then for the next Fast Forward on PPN episode is going to be on September 9th, and where our guest will be Harness founder and CTO Jody Banzal, who's just a great guy, and it should be a great conversation. Thanks again, everyone. You've been listening to Fast Forward on PPN. Thanks, everyone.
This has been a Players production.